All right, hello everybody. My name is Ian Maxwell. We're going to get this kicked off and started. I think it's great you're able to tune in and make some time. I'm going to do my very best to make sure this is of value for you. A couple quick housekeeping items. On the right-hand side of the screen, that's our chat window. And in there, you can type things like, that's a great slide, or, never thought of that before. Any kind of compliments or feedback are always welcome. Or if you find a slide confusing, let me know that too. I always want to make this better. And also, obviously, if you can't hear me or can't see me, I need to know that too. So I'm going to put something over there now. Can you see me? Can you hear me? But just reply within the chat window and just say yes, so I know that you can see me and see the slides, and we'll get started. And then down below, you'll see some slide. Down below is the questions, right? So, and if you have any questions that you want to ask me, make sure and ask those down below. And the good thing there is that if you have questions and I can't get back to them now, I can email you and get back to you then. Now, John is saying he cannot see me. I'm hearing from other people they can see and hear. I would say, John, hit that link and try to get back in there. I'm not sure what's going on your end, but everybody else seems to be good to go. So again, chat window on the right-hand side, feedback, and obviously any malfunctions. And then down below is for your questions, and I'll try to get to those. If I can't, I will email you or call you and get back to you with those. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started. This is going to take about an hour. I'll stick around and answer questions depending on how long people want to hang out. I love this, so I'll sit around and talk forever. We have to get on with our day eventually. And then one other quick note, I don't know anything about most of you. A couple people are coming on that I do know a little bit. We've chatted a bit, but I don't know that much about you. So this is all general advice. Before you go and take any action on anything that we talk about today, make sure and talk to somebody like me, talk to your CPA. I had a case before. I do talk about 529s, and some people just say, hey, we cashed out our 529. What do we do now? And I hadn't had a chance to really sit down and talk with them at all. And so my answer to that was, well, we had to kind of scramble and see what to do, but don't take any action yet, because for all these things, you want to make sure and test them and know what the outcome is going to be and make sure it's going to be of help. So again, this is called The Changing Reality of College Planning, How to Navigate the Shift. And again, it's an educational seminar to help students kind of figure out, and families how to figure out how to find the right schools, reduce stress, and obviously control costs and hopefully student loans. And so again, it's kind of a message and kind of a wake-up call, and I think you'll find it helpful. So, today, as things stand, the true impact of college planning, whether you do it well or you do it poorly, it extends way further, well beyond just the idea of finding the best school. And I put best in quotes there because when we say best school, we have some different criteria that we'll talk about here in a minute, versus just looking at those U.S. News rankings and World Report rankings and finding the best school on the list, okay? We want to find the best schools for you. We'll talk about how to do that. And basically, obviously, the elephant in the room is rising costs, right? The rising costs of college have really driven an increase in the complexity and the sophistication required to plan properly for college today. It's just the reality that things have shifted. And so, unfortunately, some of the strategies that we're familiar with and some of the approaches that used to work aren't as effective. But again, it's on a case-by-case basis. So you have to kind of understand how these factors are going to impact you individually, or for your family, or for your student or students. And again, the reality is that, sending kids to college today really does represent one of the biggest financial commitments that most families are going to face over their financial life cycle, right? I mean, buying homes, buying cars, those are big ticket items. And with the cost of college today, it ranks up there with just under buying a home, right? Depending where your child goes and how much we're able to control costs. You're looking at, buying, depending on what part of the country you're in, it's either a home or maybe here in San Diego where I am, a small condo, but it's significant nonetheless. And so what I try to get people to understand is that we are living in a different era, okay? And so to kind of show you what this means for dollars and cents, On the far left side, you see kind of the financial picture back in 1974. Okay, so back then the median, I was born in 1970, so I was 4 years old at the time, but median household income was about 13,000. Obviously, money went a lot further then. The average new home was about 36,000, which is now probably the cost of a new car. The average new car back then was about 4,000 or 5,000. A private college was about $2,000 a year. Wouldn't that be nice? And public university is about $500-600 a year. So obviously, much less of a financial burden back then. Now, if we took those and translated them directly into today's dollars, just a dollar for dollar comparison, the median household income now should be about 69,000 compared to 1974. New homes should be costing about 190-200,000. New cars should be about 23-24,000. Private college should be about $10,000-11,000 a year. And your public university should be running you about $25,000, maybe $3,000 a year. So that's just a comparison of 1974 dollars to today. But on the far right, we see the reality, and the reality is quite different, right? So household incomes are a little bit lower, right, than if we were to do a direct translation. This is general across the country, right? New homes are obviously a bit more, about 350. The average new car, about 36. Again, the cost of a home back in 1974. But look at private and public colleges and universities, right? The reality is that the private college is going to cost you about 4 times as much as that dollar for dollar comparison, coming in at about 50,000. That's kind of on the low end now. And public university can run you about $21,000 a year. That's 10 times as much as a direct translation of the dollar. So we're living in a very different era. And if people want to make this all work today, you have to update and change the way you approach the entire process, right? And so here's just a graph to kind of show a pretty shocking comparison. So that blue line across the top, that's your cost of college, right? And you can see that from 1985 out through about 2015, I got to try to find some new slides, but out through about 2015, college costs had a 539% increase, right? Now, what I find most surprising about this slide is you compare that to the purple line, which is your medical costs, which it's on most people's radars, right? The rising costs of medical care and healthcare costs. That's had about a 285% increase. So college is almost double that, which is pretty shocking. And then the green line down below is general cost of living. That squiggly blue line is gasoline and fuel, right? So clearly there's something going on in the background where the cost of college is quickly outpacing any of the cost of living that most families are going to face. And here we go, also comparing it to incomes, right? So that black line across the bottom is kind of median household income. And we can see that's been pretty flat, right? From 1984 out through 2012, 2013, even into today, it's been fairly flat when you do cost of living comparisons and adjustments. But then, of course, you got these costs of the schools, those colored lines squiggling up to the right there, again, far outpacing income. So average cost of your private college, again, here in California, about 68,000 is kind of the median household income. Again, your private schools running about 50, public schools out of state running, 35, 40, in state about 20. And then you look at the average 529 balance running about 24,000, right? So that's going to help, but it's not going to get you all the way through. But if you think back to that slide and those 1974 numbers, if you had a 529 with $10,000-15,000 in there, and you're looking at the more expensive option of a private school at $3,000 a year, you can get a couple kids through school. You're not worried about loans. It's not going to impact. You've got enough saved. But obviously today, with $15,000-20,000 saved up, that's going to cover some costs, but not all of it for sure. So people are still kind of in this mindset of saving for college, and that's good. I'm not beating anybody up if they've done that. But now you have to understand how to control your out-of-pocket costs, right? What's it going to cost you to get this kid through college, right? And so another big factor in this that some people may or may not be aware of is that we're also facing what they call a completion crisis, right? And that is that when you, and I see Peter had a question there. If you could put that down below, I'll get to that in a minute. I will get to those questions. The question was, are the costs just tuition or what's included? That's your kind of all-in costs for tuition and fees on those. just to get to that question really quick. Thanks. Thanks, Per. So when talking about this completion crisis, that is that most people have this idea that, we plan for college and think of this 4-year window. But in reality, that's not true. There's what I call the 4-year myth. Okay, only about half of full-time undergrad students graduate within that 4-year window that we all have in mind. And there's a reason why that's happening. It has to do with planning, right? A lot of people, again, are using this kind of old approach to plan for school for their kids, and there's this really big kind of overwhelming concern for saving and the cost. But you have to understand is that focusing on the student is important, making sure that how they're going to get out of there in that desired 4-year window. It takes more than just focusing on cost of the school. It's finding the right schools and making sure that the student has a direction to get through there, hopefully within that 4-year window. And what's most important is that if they do go into years 5 and 6, the schools can charge you a little bit extra if they go outside that 4-year window, because obviously they're taking a spot that would have been reserved for new people coming in. And a lot of times some of that financial aid you may be getting can expire. So has a dramatic impact on those costs of years 5 and 6. And here's what it looks like, right? Again, the cost is magnified by the numbers of years in school. So at most of these kind of non-flagship schools, right, kind of lower tier schools, about 20% of people are getting out within 4 years. We look at these flagship 4-year schools, kind of the stronger schools that have a focus on getting folks out. It can range in that 30 to 35, 40% range. And then there's the cost on the right-hand side. It's about $68,000 per year when you go into years 5 and 6, because not just for looking at tuition fees and living expenses, but also that foregone income, right? If the child had been out of the house, financially independent, and had been working, right, you're losing that income as well. So those extra years in school have an exponential impact on that out-of-pocket cost, okay? And so clearly it's not just about saving in a 529 or similar account and getting good grades. Saving for college is important. Obviously, the student has to do well. But the ripple effects of kind of ignoring this larger shift can have a big impact on a lot of different factors. The financial independence of the student when they get out, the parent's retirement, right? When looking at these costs, and you'll see some very powerful email at the end of this. It's not my words to show you what I mean when talking about the cost, but it can impact the retirement. If you have future students and you don't plan well, that could impact their ability to choose schools, right? Depending what money is available. So it's very important that people kind of expand their understanding of what's going on out there now, okay? And so now, like I tell people more than ever, knowing how to control the cost of college is as important, if not more important, than knowing how to save, okay? And a quick little bullet down there, 2 of the best ways to reduce college costs is to find best fit schools, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute, and making sure your kids graduate on time. Those are 2 very important factors. Again, knowing what that best fit school means. It's not where they rank on some given list that's coming out. It's really making sure it's a good fit for the family and for the student, and getting them out in that 4-year window. What's the school's track record? We'll get into how to pick schools a little bit later. And basically, to summarize, I mean, so the way we're taught to plan for college is basically designed for a world that no longer exists, right? The older strategies, I talk to a lot of people sometimes, they say, oh, I'm fine, I've got a 529, or I have a financial advisor and they've gotten putting money into a 529 or some similar account. And again, saving for college is clearly important. I mean, look at the costs. I'm not beating anybody up for saving, but there's a lot more to it than a 529. And in some cases, actually having money in a 529 can do more harm than good. And I'll show you how later when we talk about how costs are actually calculated. So it's a bit of a false sense of security to assume that you're all set just because those things are going on. There's a lot more to look at, especially when you want to compare college costs to your retirement, right? They definitely influence each other. So there's a new way to do it, and the old ways don't necessarily help anymore as much like they used to, okay? So the shift that I'm talking about, again, it forces a broader perspective on the experience, right? It's just not about these 529s. If you feel like you got a 529, your advisor says you're all set, may not be true, right? You have to understand the impacts and really the process we look at there's three phases. There's the admissions process of getting them into the right school. There's sticking with you guys while the student is there, because every year we might have to reassess your financial aid packages, right? And then an eye on with the kind of keeping the end in mind post graduation. What can we do to help set that student up as much as possible to find a sense of financial independence when they're done? Okay, so it's not just the admissions process; it's while they're there and after they get out as well that we kind of want to keep an eye on. So again, using these outdated strategies can actually cost students and parents tens of thousands of dollars, right? Over a 4-5 year college career. Poor planning can cost, if you're looking at $10,000 a year, it's $50,000 if they take 5 years to get out. It also eats up a lot of time, and like I said, can kind of jeopardize, future students. I have a little bullet there that says, beware of financial salespeople. As I said, cost is a big deal, but it's also finding the right schools and helping the student be prepared to graduate on time. And so some people out there kind of pose as college planners, and there's a strategy that we do use sometimes, and it does work, but sometimes you can move some assets into cash value life insurance, and that kind of helps with the financial calculations. But that may or may not, right? And so if someone comes to you and says, oh, just move your money in here and this is going to bring your costs down, you want to say, show me. Make sure they show you that on paper, because it doesn't always work. In most cases, it's that along with some other things as well. But some people out there just want to throw that out you and say, oh, this is going to bring down your EFC. Make sure they prove that. And if you have someone you're dealing with and you have concerns, call me and I'll show you if what they're telling you is true or not. But be careful, okay? There are people that take advantage of this, the anxiety that parents and students go through. Just make sure you're working with someone who is ethical, okay? And so, again, repeating, this lack of understanding of how to control these out-of-pocket costs can disrupt all the household finances, right? And again, these 529s, because of how these dynamics have shifted, they're not working the way we expect in all cases. They can actually hurt more than help, okay? And again, now what's happening is because people are using these outdated approaches to plan for school and not really digging into the details and not really, understanding how do you, what's the impact of your retirement on your retirement. If you send these kids to college, 1, 2, 3, or 4 kids, can have a big impact, right? And so what happens a lot of times is, as you saw those slides, with college costs increasing compared to other costs of living, college costs going up in comparison to the growth of income and salaries, is people are relying a lot on loans, right? So that's how people are filling that gap. Because if you look at those slides, like, well, how are people making it work, right? Well, there's a growing reliance on student loans. Now, I had student loans. If you come to me, we have people that do take out student loans. There's nothing wrong with that, because in the end, you're investing in the student, and that's always a great investment. But you want to try and reduce those loans as much as possible. So knowing what resources are out there, knowing what you have access to, loans are kind of a last resort, okay? Because those loans are growing, and I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute that's pretty shocking, right? So how big is this loan concern or issue, right? So again, using these old issues, these old approaches to address the shift has led to an unprecedented rise in student loans, actually. And as of December of last year, we crossed a major threshold, and that's a $1.5 trillion. So as of today, there are $1.5 trillion in student debt out there. And what that means is, if these old approaches were working, why is this wave of student debt growing the way it is, right? And so the impact of that is that now student loan debt is second only to mortgage debt, right? The mortgage debt that's out there. So student loans have now outpaced both auto loans and credit card debt, right? So it's the second largest tranche of debt out there in the economy, second only to mortgages, which is pretty shocking, right? And so here we see that, most kids getting out of college are going to graduate with about $40,000 on average, right? And a lot of times these loans too, they're put out there by the government, so that, whether you can pay it back or not, there's really no impact to the school. They're kind of off the hook. And so, you have to kind of consider that. And also another thing to think about too is that a lot of times these student loans are immune to bankruptcy. So they follow you forever. Even if you declare bankruptcy, you can't get away from them. So again, we use them. And again, it's an investment in the student, but you want to use them sparingly. Okay. Um, and again, having these loans after college can kind of have an impact on career choices and can delay financial independence. I see one more person, Jennifer, saying that she can't see me. I'm trying to understand why that would be. Other folks are saying that they can. Um, Jennifer, if you can't, I will get with you after the fact, and I'm happy to sit down and go through this with you one-on-one. If you can listen in, I think you'll still get some good information from that. I'm not sure why you can't see. I apologize for that, but I'll sit down and go through this for you. I see your Rawell says he sees me and he sees the slides. So I actually have a question too. Are you trying to see me as like my camera, or are you able to see the slides? I didn't turn my camera on, so nobody can see me. I want you to focus on the slides and not my face. So if you can clarify, Jennifer, if you mean you can't see me personally, if you can't see the slides, that's an important point to consider. Let's keep moving on. Again, Jennifer, you can't see, I'm happy to sit down and go through this with you after the fact. So again, you don't want to delay, you want to kind of use these student loans as sparingly as possible. It's kind of a last resort, okay? So again, here's kind of a cost scenario. And when I tell people, so if you have a financial advisor or you have someone that's helping you out in terms of your retirement, what I would tell you is if you want to know if they really know what they're talking about, you want to say, okay, map out my retirement and show me what it looks like if I were to buy a Ferrari and finance that over a 5 or 6 year period when my oldest child turns 18, when my kids start going to college. And so when I say that, if you don't plan properly and you go into one of these private schools at 50, 60, 70 grand a year, 4 or 5 years, $250,000 is a very realistic number. So people kind of chuckle when I say buy a Ferrari. Maybe it's a used Ferrari. I don't know. I've priced them lately, but it's significant, right? And so if you were to take a loan for that, you probably would pay back about $380,000 and finance over 10 years. It's about $3 grand a month. That's a pretty hefty burden to put on a brand new graduate, right, out with a new degree and a new salary, and they got this $3,000 a month loan coming through. So typically parents have to help out. So again, you want to plan properly. So we want to make sure that we want to use these loans sparingly and make sure that they're optimized as well, different loan packages. All right. And so a couple schools did some studies, and I wanted to show you this. Graduating on time versus taking more than 4 years. So at Temple, we can see that the student that graduated on time had about $20,000 of debt, student loan debt, and just staying for another 2 years, that jumped up to $35,000, right? Not quite double, but about 70%. And then we see there at Austin, Texas, on time, again, about $19,000 in 6 years. That jumped up to about 32. So not quite double, but significantly more, So again, we want to make sure that we understand the impact. And if your child needs more time, that's fine, but we just need to plan for that, okay? And again, here's just a look at like student loan debt, right? And the thing to think about too is a lot, there's the issue of finding a job, right? So a lot of the planning that we do on the student side, and you'll see the 4 areas of college planning here in a minute. But what we do on the student side is making sure they have a rough idea of the careers they're interested in. I'm not trying to take a teenager and make them nail down the rest of their life. Obviously, that's just not realistic, right? But we can definitely, someone jokingly said, teenagers might not tell you what they want to do, but they're good at telling you what they don't want to do. So let's find out, if they absolutely do not want to work with animals, okay, let's rule out veterinarians. You kind of go through and chop it down. And once you have that set of careers, we can kind of make sure that their majors and schools are set up accordingly. So again, we just want to make sure that those loans are minimized. And even if they have delinquency, right, that's going to hurt their credit scores. So this issue of student loan debt is kind of the only way to make this all work. If you don't plan properly, again, that's one of our main focuses is trying to reduce or possibly eliminate the need for these loans. And again, back to the career choices, right? Job opportunities. Those starting salaries or the blue lines down below, similar to the one we saw earlier, those are kind of flat, whereas the costs of schools are vastly and quickly outpacing that. So, it used to be the old days, you can kind of work your way through college if you had to. Now it's probably a combination of working, financial aid, loans, and help from mom and dad, right, to make it all work. So again, in making sure that they can find meaningful work that pays when they're done is also a big priority in what we want to do. Okay, Jennifer, good. You can see me now. That's great. If you can see my face, let me know. You would have special access to my camera somehow. But yeah, you should be able to see the slides. That's most important, not me. As long as you can hear me, that's good. So again, looking at what they're going to do. Remember, I said it's getting them in the admissions process while they're in attendance, and also post-graduation, right? Let's try to get a feel for what that might look like. Okay. And so the main takeaway here is, like I said, for those that make it work today, it's got to be a holistic process, right? You definitely don't want to rely on hearsay and myths and what some guy said or what you heard on the internet. You want to use systems that work, right? And so kind of manage the complexity, support the student through the whole thing, and obviously keep an eye on costs. It's got to be all three of those things together. Okay, and this is a kind of a powerful slide too. I say, do you want information versus insight, right? And what we try to offer our clients is insight. And so in the middle there, you see 2.3 billion results in half a second. That's the results I got when I went into Google and typed in the search string, free money for college, right? And I do that once in a while to check it. Sometimes it's 2 billion, sometimes it's more, sometimes a little bit less, but billions of results if you put in free money for college. So, there's plenty of information out there, no doubt, but you want to make sure you're getting the right information that applies to you, the insights of what information you need to know, what guidance you need, right, to control college costs, reduce stress, protect your retirement, right, and make it a fun experience. College is a very fun, exciting time, right? We want to keep it that way. So as the shift continues to evolve around us, right, I think we all kind of feel that it's going on. I'm trying to kind of quantify that for you. But getting up-to-date college planning guidance is absolutely key, right? You have to know the new rules of the game, so to speak. Okay, and so the good news, though, is that through this massive shift that's been going on, we recognize one thing is very simple yet very important, and that is that what people want from college hasn't changed much, right? Looking back at 1974 all the way through now, what people want is what they've always wanted, right? They want college to be a launch pad into a brighter future, whether it's an adult going back to school, a grandparent going back to school, or a new high school student going out there for the first time. It's a launch pad, right, into a better world. And so that's why we want to kind of, like I said, make sure that it stays that way, if at all possible. Okay, that's the good news, and that's kind of the focus, is to make it fun and make it exciting. It's an exciting time. I remember my college days; it was a blast. Now, so with all that in mind, we decided it's time to kind of put some information out there for people, students and families. And if you want to pass this link on to any kind of families or students that could use information, please feel free. We're trying to give you the education, the tools and strategies that you really need to know to make it all work today in the modern world, not like it's 1985. Okay, so that's me. There you can see a picture of me. So I don't always wear a suit, but obviously I wanted to for this one. A little bit about me. So I've got two companies. I've got Rev Resco College Planning, which is the one you're kind of tuning into now. And I also have a wealth advisory and retirement planning business. And the reason I have both of those is I found these two go hand in hand. I started off as a retirement planner. And like I told you, as I started mapping out people's retirement and doing it in a truthful and meaningful way, and we looked out at college, I had to start to put some pretty big costs, a big speed bump on the road to retirement, which was college. And so the more I dug into that and how to actually help people with that, that's what kind of led me to offer this as a separate service and to have the depth to really go into it, what people need to know. Sometimes people need both. Sometimes people need one or the other, but I have both bases covered because they really fit hand in hand, okay? I've got an article out there in Forbes. I hope to have more soon. I've got a couple articles out there on Kiplinger. If you want to go read those, just type in Ian Maxwell Kiplinger. It should come up. Get an idea about how I think about finance. I myself went to Williams College. I think when I started my freshman year, it was 17,000, and when I got out, it was 23. And I also took 5 years to graduate, right? So I'm talking about things from experience. I was an officer in the United States Marine Corps. Had a good time and some bad times. If those have been in, you'll know what that means. It can be great. It can be tough, but I really do value that time as in the Marines. And I've been here in San Diego since 1983, off and on, but I help people all around the country with technology today. Obviously, physical location does not limit my ability to help people wherever they might be. So don't be intimidated if you don't live here locally to meet with me. We'll make it work. And so again, this is kind of the two brands, and the way it's pronounced is Reveresco. And where it came from was I was trying to name my company. I didn't want to use my last name of Maxwell. So I found out that the Maxwell clan in Scotland, their clan motto was Reveresco, to grow, flourish, strengthen, and become anew. I thought that was a very nice theme for both sides of the fence, whether it's college or retirement. And so just look for the 3 leaves. You might get, depending how you work with me, you might see emails from both different companies. But as long as you see the 3 leaves, you know it's me. And just for history buffs in the background, that's actually Cairliv Rock Castle, which was the original Maxwell house, the original Maxwell stronghold. It's the only triangular castle in Great Britain. So they actually ripped down the entire back wall there to make sure it couldn't be used for in the future because it withstood many sieges. But anyways, that's the company and kind of where I got the name, if you wonder how I picked that. Okay. And this is the team too. So again, they say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a team to plan for college. All right. So there's me, and my specialty is kind of on that financial side of the house. Understand a lot about the student services side, as well as Corey, Paula, and Abraham. You'll talk to you'll talk to all of us at some point in the process, right? But they're going to be the ones that are going to be looking at student positioning. And you'll see the 4 areas of college planning coming up. And again, we all communicate and talk. We've got a great proprietary software platform that keeps us all engaged and on the same sheet of music, so to speak. But that's the team. Okay, it'll be me, Corey, Paula, and Abraham, and we'll be the ones kind of helping you and your student kind of work through those phases that we talked about, admissions, while you're there, and looking at post-graduation. Okay. And so basically, whether you've done a lot of planning or no planning at all, you're coming in here just like kind of in a panic, that's okay. What we try to do is we really want to remove the guesswork, right? We want to leverage for you time-tested strategies to control the cost of college and make sure that we're removing stress and working through these processes in a systematic way. You want to tune out all the noise, okay? Avoid the big mistakes that people are making by kind of listening to all these myths or not really getting a new view on what's going on out there, and make sure you're working off what's true, right? Keep the student a priority. It doesn't work unless, of course, the child is going to actually get to school, stay there, right? Not drop out or come home early, but you don't want them to stay too long either. So we have to keep a focus on the student. Leave no stone unturned to make sure that you're positioned in such a way that we can optimize all the resources you have available to you. That's one way we help to reduce the loans if necessary. And kind of sleep well at night. Know that you did the best you could, right? You came out, you got the help you needed. Everybody did the best they could. And, and hopefully improve your household finances along the way, because we can't ignore that when looking at this college planning process. It's all kind of tied together now. And so now I want to go into the section where I'm going to talk about some key concepts. I want to make sure that this webinar is useful and you have some information you can take away. So now is a good time to take notes if you haven't been already. So good, everybody can see me and hear me now still. So again, these are kind of practical lessons to kind of work yourself through this world of college planning, and hopefully without going broke, right? So let's get started. And I know kind of feels like I'm going to be fire hosing you a little bit, but again, just stay calm, take good notes, and know that I'm here to answer questions that you may have. This doesn't have to end when the webinar ends. Okay, you can have my contact information. Just give me a call or send me an email. But here we go. This is the shift we talked about, right? We want to get to the smiling graduate. So we don't want to use outdated strategies. We want to basically control the costs, avoid loans, try to get them out in 4 years, and make sure they've got a couple job opportunities lined up, career choices, okay? So, and again, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to show you a smarter way to plan, right? We're going to break it down into a systematic process, keep everyone on track, keep anxiety at a minimum, and get the best results possible. We have a 60-point checklist that's broken down month to month within the junior and senior years, that we're all working off the same system. We've got the team. I showed you myself, Corey, Paul, and Abraham, to give you the insights, not just information, but the insights that you need. We're going to develop a plan for you to get you as many students as you have, 1, 2, 3, 4 students through the whole thing, preserve your finances in the process, and again, make sure we're taking advantage of all those resources, right? And here's some of the impacts of what we can do. Right? We routinely save families tens of thousands of dollars per year on college costs, which can be 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000, right, over a 4 or 5 year period. So we have these proprietary tools, strategies to do that. It has real financial impact, right? Remove the guesswork and the anxiety, make sure we're using relevant strategies that apply today. Provide you guidance through the career search and for the student and for the parents, right? We're all in this together. Again, looking at the admissions, application, selection process. When I say best fit colleges, that's coming up here again, we look at an academic fit, we look at a social fit, and we want to look at the financial criteria, right? We're going to get into that in a minute, but those are, when we say best fit schools, that's what we're looking at. Not necessarily where they rank, but we want to find those academic, social, and financial fits. And you'll see a bit more about what that means when we get into picking schools. And again, we'll kind of show you, what's really going on behind the curtain, how are colleges deciding who's getting money and who's getting in, right? So just to be clear, though, this is not a quick fix. It's not like you sign up with me and all of a sudden the admissions letters start pouring in, right? It does take some work, okay? It's not a quick fix. We'll show you the ways to make this process manageable, and hopefully for whatever time and money you invest, we want to get the best outcomes possible, right? That's what we are offering. So here's the 4 key areas of college planning and how we break it down, right? So in the upper left, you have student positioning, right? And those are all the bullet points in there. And the main thing that's going to come out of that is that target list of schools, right? Again, based on academic, social, financial fit, we want to get a list of colleges that we're going to target for the applications and all the essays and all that work that's going to go into it. Forms processing, right? Help you with the FAFSA, help you with the CSS profile. The CSS profile is used by a lot of higher end private colleges like Williams, where I went, and they ask for a lot more detail than the CSS, than the FAFSA, I'm sorry. So we help you process all those forms, make sure they're done accurately, submitted on time, and then we'll help you analyze financial awards, help you with appeals processes if necessary, right? And again, guiding the student loans. Moving to the upper right, the financial positioning piece, right? We want to look at EFC, which is your expected family contribution. We want to help you implement those strategies, look at scholarships and aid packages, come up with a plan that addresses both college and your retirement, right? I want everybody to retire happily and get the kids through school. And again, coordinated communications is vital, right? We have a manual, we've got a reminder system, we've got the checklists, we have accountability calls, and again, we have this proprietary software platform you get access to keep everybody kind of dancing to the same sheet of music, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how we break it down, and that's how you should be thinking about it as well, okay? So here's the key concepts, right? You want to understand the financial aid rulebook, how it applies to you. Know which schools have money, which do not. Big criteria on building that college list. Assess your retirement, taking college costs into consideration. Again, if you have an advisor, that's fine, but show them, hey, what's going to look like when my student goes to school? Show me if I were to buy a $250,000 car and finance it for 5 or 6 years, what's the impact on my retirement, right? File your forms accurately on time and negotiate with the schools when appropriate. That's kind of so we're going to dive into each of those really quickly. After this, we'll see some case studies and then we'll wrap it up. So again, these financial rules are based on the Higher Education Reauthorization Act. It was started in 1965. And while it's gone through some updates over time, it's still, could use could use another look, let's say. Again, developed by Congress, 101 different criteria to decide what you can afford, what they think you can afford for school. Again, depending when that has been updated, that criteria can be kind of difficult to deal with. They don't always make sense. It can be very complex. And understanding how those rules apply to you is the first step in controlling your out-of-pocket costs. Okay, so just like with tax planning, knowing a little bit, you can save yourself a little bit of money. If you know a lot about these rules, you can save yourself a ton. Like I said, up to tens of thousands of dollars per year, right? Which adds up very quickly. So let's talk about EFC, right? So EFC is your expected family contribution. Again, if you have an advisor, they're putting in a 529 plan, ask them about EFC. If they look a little bit confused, you might want to add us to your team during that window of college while your kids are there. You can always go back to them. You have to fire them and get rid of them, but you might want to bring us on as a consulting role to get you through the college process, and you can jump back over with them. That's fine. So the formula for getting in school looks like this: COA, which is cost of attendance, subtract, take off your EFC, and that's going to equal your need. Now remember this: need is a good thing. You want to have need because that's what the school is on the hook to help you address, either through aid, loans, or some other means. So here's how that looks, right? And we're going to compare a public and a private school. Okay. So on the left-hand side, you got a private school that costs $30,000. On the right, we've got the public school that costs $70,000. Now your EFC, that's the cost of attendance. We can't control that, right? They tell us how much it costs to get into their school. EFC is $20,000. Now that doesn't change no matter where you apply. It's always going to be $20,000. So see that for the public school, you have a need of $10,000. On the private school, you have a need of $50,000. Now, please pay attention here because I'm going to show you where a lot of families would look at that private school and say, forget it, we're not even going to look at that. There's no way that that's going to happen. But watch when we work through the numbers of how that actually looks. A lot of people actually end up paying more to go to that public school than the private, and I'll show you how it's coming up. So again, need's a good thing. Don't be shy about picking schools that are more expensive, because if you understand how that EFC works and how your costs are going to be calculated, sometimes the out-of-pocket cost for that public school can actually be more than the private school, okay? And again, you have to know which schools have money. These are the three main questions when picking schools. We talked about a financial fit. We want to know what percentage of that need are they going to help you meet? How are they going to help you meet that need? How much of it is going to be free money versus loans or work programs and things like that? And how long does it take a student to graduate, right? So again, when we say picking the right schools, those are three main criteria, because obviously getting them out on time can save you about 60, 70 grand a year, right? For you avoiding those years 5 and 6. And we want to get as much free money as we can, right? So again, back to these same schools, okay? Now watch this. This is very interesting. So the need on the public school was 10,000, while the need on the private school was 50. On the public school, they're going to help you meet half of that need, and of that, half of it will be gift aid, which means of the 10,000, they're going to give you 5,000. They'll help you meet 5,000 of that. Half of that will be gift aid or free money. So they're going to give you $2,500 per year, okay? And let's just say in this case, it takes the kids 6 years to graduate, for example. So we see at the bottom, the school gives $25,000 a year. The parents' out-of-pocket cost is going to be $27,500 per year. Let's look at the private school, a $50,000 need. Now, in this case, the private school is going to help you meet 100% of that need. And that's not uncommon. 80, 90, 100% is not uncommon. Of that, 92% is going to be gift aid. Okay, so you can kind of see where this is going. And let's just say in this case, the kid gets out in 4 years, right? They've got better processes, tools, support systems in place to get the children out on time, the students out on time. So now the school is going to give you $46,000 of free money per year, and you're going to only be spending $23,400 compared to $27,500 for the public school. So the private school is having a lower out-of-pocket cost than the public school. Okay, and here's what that is going to translate to in total. So if you spend $27,500 for the public school over 6 years, you're going to spend $165,000 total. If you pay $23,400 for the private school, the student graduates in 4 years, your out-of-pocket cost is $93,600. So that's a difference of $71,000, $71,400 to be exact, that you're saving by going to the more expensive private school. So the takeaway here is don't rule out the more expensive private schools, because again, you have to know who has money, what's their record of giving it out, and how much are they going to give in the form of aid. Okay, hope everybody sees that. It's a pretty important message. So now talking about retirement very quickly, right? We want to begin with the end in mind, right? So you want to get a really good idea of where you are for retirement right now and what's that impact of college going to be for 1, 2, 3 students, or many you have, okay? So you want to test your current plan and know how it's going to work. On the retirement side, we use a process called results in advanced planning. And so when we gather your information, we'll show you a few different scenarios. We want to see what happens if you stay the current course and make no changes. We'll say, well, what if we gave you in scenario 2 just some advice? You can go do it on your own. There are some diehard do-it-yourselfers out there. We're not trying to get in anybody's way if they want to do that. So maybe what if we gave you a couple little tips and you can kind of do some things on your own? And then, of course, third scenario is, what if you hired us? What's the difference, right? So you'll see what impact we may or may not have before we start moving things around, or readjusting different assets, or how you're set up, or opening accounts, or moving things around. So we'll show you all that beforehand, so you'll know the reason why, right? And that's what some people don't do. Those financial salespeople in the beginning, they show you some things that they say are going to lower your EFC, but you really want to make sure that's true before you go down that road. So we'll identify the strengths and weaknesses of your plan, and see what changes we can make to improve your outcomes. And once it's all said and done, you'll have a nice complete package to understand how you're going to get through the college process, preserve your retirement along the way, and preserve hopefully the household finances as well. Okay. Because in reality, to keep it simple, there's really only three ways you can pay for college, right? There's current income, right, which you're making now. There's out of your assets, right, going into different accounts and savings and investments. And there's student loans, right, and borrowing. And depending which of those three we use and how we use them, we always kind of maintain what I call your sleep well at night factor, right? When your head hits the pillow at night, we want you to be sleeping well, all right? And not worrying as much as you might have otherwise. And so it's important on this retirement piece, is this is most commonly overlooked, right? They kind of view college in a vacuum, or retirement in a vacuum. If you don't view them together, you can be in for a pretty rude awakening, okay? So again, it can really have an impact on your peace of mind for retirement and future saves and quality of life. And remember, for those gaps in your retirement, there's no student loans, right? The kids have to go to college. There's no student loans to fill in retirement gaps. So we want to look at those gaps now and not be caught off guard later. Okay. This is a big one too, is filling out your forms accurately and on time. Okay. So there's a lot of big mistakes we see. You have to understand those 101 criteria, understand which of those apply to you and how. And then here's some big mistakes. Definitely write these down and take note. A lot of people, I don't know why, but they double report their income. A lot of people over report their assets. And then when filling out some of these forms, there's a neat tool they developed called the DRT, the data retrieval tool. And this basically kind of links up to the IRS and pulls in your tax returns. And just so you know, the students are going to look at your past 2 years of tax returns, prior years. So if you come to me, we're going to want to see 2 years of tax returns, because that's what schools want to see. But the problem is that DRT tool, while it's pretty slick and saves some time, the mapping of those data fields is not always accurate. So it can lead to errors on your FAFSA and CSS profiles that may end up costing you money. So while it's a great baseline to start it off, we want to make sure and verify what that pulls over, and make sure it ends up in the right place. And you'll see some case studies here at the end of what can happen if you don't, if you're not accurate. Okay. So here's a really big tip, right? So about 80% of the financial aid forms are sent in incorrectly. And typically those errors are in favor of the student, in favor of the school. They tend to hurt the families. They don't always report back on the things where you're paying more than you have to, but they'll definitely catch you if you're not paying enough. So pay attention to what is and is not an asset. People over-report this. So the two biggest mistakes in that area, you don't need to report the equity on your primary residence, right? Not required. And you don't need to report retirement assets. In one of the case studies, you'll see a family that did that, and the impact it had when that was corrected. Okay, so don't report the equity on your primary residence, and don't need to report your retirement accounts. Okay, IRAs, 401ks, those types of things. Special circumstances, right? So if you're a business owner, right? If you own a lot of rental properties or second, third homes, big stock mutual fund portfolios, big pools of liquid assets, and you have a high income, it doesn't mean that there's no help for you. It just means that those are special cases that require, some, more sophisticated approaches to help you control these costs. And again, it's not just about the cost, it's also about those other 4 areas of helping the students get in and working with the students, working with your forms, and the financial piece as well. Sometimes we can find the money elsewhere to offset the cost of school. It might not just be tied directly to your EFC. So you'll see a case study for that as well. And then negotiating. When you negotiate with the schools, you have to know when, right? You want to know maybe they didn't give you enough based on research that we've done, what we were expecting. Maybe other schools give more. We can kind of play those off against each other. Maybe you had a change in circumstances in your prior year, those 2 years tax returns. Well, maybe since then something came up. Maybe somebody lost a job, maybe you got married, divorced, maybe some of those liquid assets that were reported are not there anymore. Spike in income, maybe a bonus, or you won the lottery, had an inheritance. So even though you're sending in those 2 prior years of tax returns, what's going on now is still a negotiation point for the schools to be aware of. If we don't tell them, they don't know. Okay, so when you approach the schools, you want to make sure you do it before you commit. You want to make sure and call and talk to a financial aid officer, not the student that's probably going to pick up the phone. You want to talk to a decision maker. You want to explain your situation very clearly. And this is most important. You have to submit and back it up with some documentation. They're not just going to take your verbal over the phone. They want to see it in writing. Okay, that can really make a big difference. So remember that. And there's a quick little bonus step we call the tax scholarship. So if you're making a household 180,000 or more, again, if you're a business owner, we have a pretty cool strategy called the tax scholarship. And we can basically, like I said, manipulate other things on your financial profile to offset the cost of school. It might not be actually tied to the actual college cost, but we look for ways to find the money to offset the cost of school. So business owners making pretty good money, make sure and talk about the tax scholarship if we're in contact after this is done. Okay. So here's a quick recap, kind of how it all should work. Then we're going to get into some case studies, and then we'll wrap it up. Coming up on almost an hour here, so keeping track of the time. So you want to properly position the student. We talked about finding the right schools, having a rough idea of majors and careers, right? Help them make sure they get out on time. You want to lower your EFC as much as possible so that you have a higher need that the schools are going to help you with. You want to pick the right schools that have money and will give you a significant amount of aid to help bring that cost down. And it might be the more expensive private school. Don't be scared by that. You want to know the impact on your retirement. If you're not on track, we got to fix it now, right? It doesn't help to put it off and save it later. Know where you're going to get your money to pay for school. Where is that coming from? Get your forms in on time and accurately, and then negotiate with the schools when appropriate. That's kind of a high-level summary of some key concepts you can take away. There's more to it than that, obviously, but I want you to be able to take something away that you can keep in mind as you work through the process, okay? Now we'll get into the case studies and then kind of wrap it up, right? So here's a case study. I call it high real estate assets. This may or may not apply to you. I tried to pick a sampling that might apply to people out there. So here's a family. They live in a $2 million home, right? They also have a beachfront condo that's paid for, also for $2 million. And they make pretty good money, over $100,000 a year. So on that initial glance, they might think, there's no way we're going to get any help, no way we're going to get any aid. So, what did we do to address that issue? Well, the solution was we helped them understand the applicable rules, the 101 criteria. We helped control their evolving EFC, and I say evolving because they had 3 kids. So as you have more kids in school at the same time, that's going to change your EFC in your favor. It's going to bring your EFC down. And then, of course, we looked at schools that had money. So the outcome for these people was that if 3 kids that all went to top-ranked private schools, they averaged about $36,000 a year in free money. So here's this family on the left with $2 million homes, one paid for, a 6-figure income, and the total package with all 3 girls getting through school was $432,000 of free money to the family. Now, I don't care how much you make or how much you're worth. That's a lot of money, no matter how you look at it. So again, knowing how these rules apply to you, don't write yourself off that you make too much or have or own too much. And again, picking the right schools that have money, you can see the impact right there for this family. And a quick side note is that the mom was a real estate agent, so she did have varying income. So every year we had to go back to the school, and despite what was shown in their tax returns, we made adjustments to make sure that they were aware that there's sometimes, for real estate, if you're an agent, there's spikes in income and then there's slow years as well. So make sure the school is aware of that, and your aid package can shift from year to year. Okay, so that's high real estate assets. This next one is not a low financial award, right? Here's a household with 3 boys. Income and assets made it really hard to get them any aid. They're in what I call the zone. The zone is where families make pretty good money in that $180,000, $200,000 range, where it kind of knocks you out of the running, could knock you out of the running for aid, but the cost of college still hurts, right? So it's this weird limbo zone where we can really have a lot of impact for people. So again, we help them understand the rules. It's always going to be there. Control their EFC, pick the right schools. We analyzed very carefully their financial situation to eliminate inefficiencies and see if we could offset the cost of school in other ways and develop a plan to bridge those gaps. So all three boys went to state schools. They didn't get that much aid, only about $2,500 per kid per year, so about $27,000 total. But when looking at their financial picture and tuning that up and finding efficiencies, we're able to save them about $350,000 in the long run for their retirement. So it still has an offset for that cost of, we protect your retirement, the peace of mind there. So there's always something we can do to kind of improve the overall outcome, looking at college and retirement together, okay? This one is the inaccurate asset report, and this is about people that put their retirement assets. So look what happened here. So you have a family, they were laid off from their jobs. They were making about $250,000 a year, good money. Got laid off. One was just working at Home Depot, one was at Starbucks, just trying to fill the gaps and do what they could. The big mistake they made is over that time when they're making the good money, they built up about $800,000 in retirement money, and they put that on their financial aid forms. So they overreported their assets by $800,000, and the kids are already in school, right? So we like to target high school kids, but we can help people who are already in college as well. So don't rule yourself out if you already have a kid that's there and you have one coming up. We can take a look at both. So we helped them correct their forms, found their accurate EFC, right? When we took that $800,000 off, we appealed to the schools for the current and for future years. And so they got about almost $6,000 in free money and free tuition, right, at the local school, SDSU here. So, it's about $17,000, $18,000, almost $20,000 coming back to them just by fixing their form. So, that's per year. So again, when I say all these numbers I quote, sometimes you have to multiply them by 4, 5, or 6 to see the impact. But that's a pretty good shift just by making sure their form was accurate, okay? Here's somebody with high liquid assets, right? This is kind of a sad story, but it's true. So here's a family that's headed by a widow. The husband had died about 4 years prior. She had 2 kids that are bound for college, and now her husband, this is a rare case, but left about $3 million in life insurance death benefit. And it's one of those rare cases where we see somebody who was properly insured. Most people are really underinsured. $3 million should be kind of a number to keep in mind. It's a whole separate discussion, but she had $3 million in liquid assets. So there's no way she's going to qualify for any aid, right? So again, went back into the rules, saw what applied to her, controlled her EFC. Again, looked at the schools with money. Those are very common themes, obviously repeating. And then we took a look at her tax and retirement situation, right, to see how those assets were positioned, to see what we could do to get her some help, right? Because even though she had that money, she wasn't, she's still a single income household, right? So we were able to get what we could do. We got her some free tuition at UCSD, again, local school, about $12,000 a year. She received another $3,000 in aid for living expenses, and so about $15,000 per year. And similar story for the second child that went to school, right? And so you multiply $15,000 a year times 2 kids, that's 30, times 4 years, it's gets into the 6 figures pretty quickly. So don't assume if you have high liquid assets that you're knocked out of the running either. And the last case study here is negotiation, right? We talked about documentation. This is the last case study, then we'll wrap it up. But so the difficulty with he said this person having some difficulty with Duke, and he was going back and forth, and there was a lot of confusion over some rental properties and business property that he'd inherited from his mom who passed away. Again, he was calling him up to the point that they were about to kind of block his number. I guess he was pretty persistent and just not getting anywhere. So again, understanding the rules, controlling EFC, guiding the appeals process, knowing how to talk to the schools, what they're looking for, but most importantly, backing it up with some documentation and updated the financial aid packages. So here's what happened. This is pretty dramatic. It doesn't always look this dramatic, but his free grant money, based on when he submitted the documentation and kind of opened up the negotiations properly, his aid package increased from $6,000 a year to $26,000 a year. So almost a $20,000 annual increase. Multiply that by 4 years, you're looking at almost $80,000, and he graduated on time, so we don't have to multiply it by 5 or 6. So again, knowing how to negotiate, this family was able to save almost $80,000 while their son was going to a pretty good school there, Duke. So again, knowing how to negotiate and when to do it is very, very important. And here's a live case. I wanted to, you don't have to read this whole thing, but I wanted to put this in here because it's not my words, but it's pretty powerful. So I'll quickly summarize. This is a family with 4 kids, right? The first one's out of college and is about to get out of grad school. Okay, they have loans from that. The second kid is through 3 semesters of college and there's loans piling up from that. Kid number 3 starts college this fall, and kid number 4 is still in high school. So she says, she and her husband make too much money to qualify for aid and tuition assistance programs, but paying for 2 college loans is crippling, and she can't imagine how she's going to add on 2 more college expenses. The kids are helping out with loans, but it's hurting them as well. This is very powerful. By the time it's all said and done, we'll be paying close to $1 million to get 4 kids through for the undergraduate degrees. So when I say $250,000 a year, when I say it's like buying a Ferrari, those aren't my words, right? That's what someone's really going through. So and they're in that zone I talked about where they make too much, but college costs still hurt. So she said, we heard you work with people like that. We'd love to have your help. We're middle class. We don't qualify for programs, but we don't have $1 million laying around to pay for all this. And hopefully I'll slide this up to an actual case study when it's done, and you'll see how it turned out. But so the costs are real. These numbers are real. Okay. So what now? We've gone through the whole thing. We're just going to close it up really quickly and say, so as a concerned parent, what can you do to kind of address this shift in a more constructive manner? They'll get you the outcomes that you like, right? So quickly summarize, right? Wherever you are in the planning process, very well prepared or no preparation at all. We want to remove that guesswork, use systematic approaches to get through the whole thing, tune out the noise, don't listen to myths and whatever you might hear people talking about or out there on the internet. We want to keep the student a priority because how they perform and get through school is going to have a big impact on your costs, right? Leave no stone unturned, maximize those resources that are out there for you. Know you did the best you could, right? And then know that you also probably improved your household finances along the way, kind of an added bonus, okay? So the next step really is quite simple, and that's just to give me a call, right? It's free. There's no obligation if you do call me. I just want to have a conversation and try to understand, how our services might be of help to you. We talked about those 4 areas of student positioning, the forms, the financial piece, and the communications involved in all of those, no matter what, So, and again, no matter what you do, if you work with me or want to work with someone else, you got to have a plan that takes both, college and retirement into account to properly address this shift of higher education and how things are changing. And again, while the program's ideal for sophomores and juniors in high school, we can even help kids who are in college. So just starts off with a call. Hope you can assess from this webinar. I'm pretty easygoing, pretty easy to talk to, not too scary, even though I was in the Marines and all that. So just give me a buzz and we'll see how we can help. And anybody who does call and have a legitimate conversation, I'll give you 3 free reports. If you have a few schools you're interested in, you want to know, kind of get an idea for, how much aid do they typically give, how fast are kids graduating, what kind of GPAs and test scores, all those kinds of things. They're quick kind of summary 2-page reports. I'll give you up to 3 of those. Again, if we have a legitimate conversation. What I mean by that is, don't just call me, tell me your name, spit out, Harvard, Yale, and Dartmouth, and then hang up. Have a legitimate conversation with me, and I'm happy to share those reports, whether we ever talk again or not. There's no obligation for that, just a way that I can help. And keep in mind, too, that if you do move to the second appointment and I get some information from you, we can pick a school, one of those 3, and I'll show you what your EFC would look like on your own, or if we can show some improvements, and you can kind of, like I said, I want you to see what we can do for you before you decide to take any action. But first report, just give me a call. I get the 3 reports no matter what. And that's my information, right? So it's Reveresco College Planning. My phone number is 858-255-6703. That's my desk phone. And just give me a call, reach out. We're happy to see, learn more about you, see how we can help. And let me see if there's any other questions down below. I didn't see any questions down below. If anybody has any, I'll stay on for a few minutes. But if you need to go, I understand. You can feel free to drop off. I'll wait for a couple minutes of any other questions. No, it's a lot I threw at you. It's kind of a fire hose, like I said. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope that it got your wheels turning. And I do hope to hear from you soon. I don't see any questions coming in. You have my email right there, ian.maxwell@reverescocollege.com. Send me an email, give me a call, give you those free reports, and we can talk. I see John asking about costs again, John. So Rachel's saying thank you. That was helpful. I'm glad you liked it. So for John, the cost it's going to depend, right? It depends on what you need and what your situation is. Those packages that I talked about, those 4 different areas, those can be broken up individually or mixed and matched. So it's hard for me to say what you would need. So give me a buzz. We can get into that. That's no problem at all. Typically, we end up saving people a lot more than our services cost. Again, if I save you $10,000, I don't charge $10,000. Nothing near that. But if I save you that in 1 year, I'll multiply it by 4 or 5. It's a pretty good return on investment. And again, you'll know that before you decide to pull the trigger. Right? We're not out here to trick anybody or trap you or anything like that. So you'll know that before you take any action. And with that, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. I'm really glad you tuned in. Hope you found it helpful. And I hope to hear from you soon. Have a good day and have a great weekend. Thanks for your time. Okay, bye.